Here's something that might not sit right with you. Heart disease will kill roughly 650,000 Americans this year alone. That's one in every four deaths in the entire country. But you probably don't think about it when you book a flight. Instead, you worry about the plane going down. You grip the armrest during turbulence. You wince whenever the cabin makes a strange noise. And I can tell you exactly why that happens. Because your brain isn't broken, it's just running outdated software. So stick around because by the end of this, you'll understand why your fears don't match reality and what you can actually do about it. Let's start with something called the availability heuristic. This is a term psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman coined back in 1974, and it explains why your brain is basically terrible at judging risk. The idea is simple. The easier something is to recall, the more likely your brain thinks it is to happen. Plane crashes are incredibly easy to recall. They're dramatic, they're visual, they happen suddenly, and the news covers every single one for days on end. A 2 o'clock a.m. alarm clock failure on a flight from Honolulu, 37 years later, people still know the name. But slowly clogged arteries building up over decades. That's not a story. That's just Tuesday. And here's the thing, your brain doesn't know the difference between I can easily remember this and this is likely to happen to me. It just assumes they're the same thing. So you fly, worried. Meanwhile, you're not worried at all about the drive to the airport, even though car accidents kill roughly 40,000 Americans every single year. The numbers are right there, and they're not even close. Now here's where it gets deeper. There's another psychological principle at play, and it's called loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky also developed this one. They won a Nobel Prize for their work, by the way. Loss aversion is the idea that losing something feels roughly twice as painful as gaining something feels good. Think about that for a second. If you have a 50% chance of winning $100 or losing $100, you won't take that bet. Most people won't. The pain of losing outweighs the joy of winning, even though the math is identical. And here's why this matters for flying. When you're in a plane, you have zero control. You're sitting in a metal tube 40,000 feet in the air, trusting strangers you've never met to get you down safely. If something goes wrong, you can't pull over. You can't hit the brakes. You just sit there. But when you're driving, you're in control. You're the one steering. You're the one deciding when to brake. Even though you're statistically more likely to die on the drive than the flight, you feel safer because you have the wheel in your hands. And that feeling of control makes the tiny, tiny risk of flying feel enormous because your brain is imagining the loss. The one-time control fails, and it hits you like a freight train. If you're finding this useful so far, hit subscribe. I drop videos like this every week, and there's a third point coming that's even better. Okay, this is the one I've been saving. There's something called negativity bias, and it's one of the most powerful forces in your brain that nobody talks about. Negativity bias is the tendency of your nervous system to respond more strongly to negative experiences than positive ones. A harsh word at work stays with you all day, but a dozen compliments just kind of roll off. Your brain is essentially standing guard against threats, and it evolved this way because missing a threat, back when we lived in caves, was a lot more dangerous than missing a good thing. Now apply that to plane crashes. When you see footage of a plane crash, or even just imagine one, your brain lights up with threat responses, heart rate goes up, cortisol floods your system, you feel something visceral in your chest. But when you think about heart disease, there's no dramatic video. There's no sudden moment. There's just a slow fade, a gradual narrowing of arteries, cells dying quietly over years. Your brain doesn't have a horror movie for heart disease, so it doesn't treat heart disease as a threat. It treats the thing with the horror movie as the threat. And the numbers prove how backwards this is. In 2022, commercial aviation had one of the safest years in history. Roughly 22 million flights worldwide, and the odds of being in a fatal accident were about 1 in 20 million. That's 0.000004%. But heart disease? Heart disease killed 650,000 Americans in the same year. 650,000. That's roughly 1,800 people every single day. And yet, you probably haven't lost a single minute of sleep over it. Let that sink in for a second. One of these is something you should actually be afraid of. The other is so rare that you'd need to fly every single day for roughly 25,000 years before you even had a 50-50 chance of being in a crash. And that 25,000 year number, that's not made up. That's from a 2020 study by the National Safety Council. They looked at lifetime odds of dying in various ways, and plane crashes came in at roughly 1 in 200,000. Compare that to heart disease at 1 in 5. 1 in 5. So the next time turbulence hits and your stomach drops, remember, your fear is not measuring actual danger. It's measuring how vivid the threat feels. And you can retrain that instinct, but only if you know it's there in the first place. So here's what you can actually do with this. First, when you feel that spike of fear on a flight, name it. Say to yourself, that's the availability heuristic acting up. It sounds almost funny, and that's the point. Giving your fear a technical name takes away its power. You're essentially catching your brain in the act of being wrong. Second, shift your focus to the data instead of the feeling. One flight, one takeoff, one landing. You're doing something extraordinarily safe. And third, and this is the one most people skip, take that fear energy and point it somewhere useful. Get your heart checked. Know your numbers, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your family history, because the thing you should actually be afraid of is sitting inside you right now, and it doesn't need a news cycle to matter. The fear of flying is a false alarm. Heart disease is the real one, and now you know how to tell the difference. If this helped you understand your own brain a little better, share it with someone who's nervous about their next flight. And subscribe, because next week I've got something even deeper on how your brain lies to you in other ways. You'll want to see this one.